Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Golden Age podcast. And this, my friends, is a very special episode because two major reasons. The first one is it's my first Modern Golden Age podcast episode with a Portuguese friend, but we're talking in English, so everyone understands. And the second one is because Tiago is a very special person to me, and to even to this project of the Modern Golden Age, and the not only the podcast, but me wanting to build something bigger with it. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, Tiago. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be in the podcast. How are you?
Well, I'm good, and let me tell you that it's a pleasure to be here with you after like so many conversations that we had about this and about your vision.
Yeah, and it's so weird because we were usually we talk in Portuguese, right? And I'm listening to
Yeah.
your English for the first time, and it's not fair because your girlfriend teaches English, and so you'll have a better accent and a better pronunciation. But that's I'll accept it.
Well,
So
we can also make it in Spanish if you prefer.
no bueno,
We
no
can switch
bueno.
languages.
It's not no good, no good, no good. But yeah, so I wanted to start actually before I actually ask you the first question. I wanted to say to everyone and to explain to everyone listening why you're one of my special guests in the podcast, because you were actually one of the first people I talked to about the podcast and me wanting to pursue this idea of the modern golden age. In fact, you're usually one of the first friends that I reach out when I have a new idea to get some feedback on, because I deeply admire the way you think about the world. And actually, this is going to be a great podcast because of it, because you've been researching some areas that I'm not that familiar with, like sustainability, the circular economy, all that stuff. And but even though you operate in different areas, we're actually together by a bunch of values, and that's something, and the friendship, of course, which is something that I really admire. And Tiago is a very special guest today, because when I was talking to him about the podcast, I was telling him that was somehow my vision, but it was lacking something. And Tiago was actually someone who came up, and some people that listen to the podcast or follow me on Twitter or on my newsletter, they know that one of my main goals is to create this modern golden age hub, a place where everyone that's working on projects that will give birth to a modern golden age can come and connect with like-minded people and build these different projects or just hang out. um, and that idea actually came from a conversation with Tiago. So if when this hub is will when it's a reality, it's in part because of our conversation. So that's why Tiago is a very special guest. That's why, Tiago, you're a very special guest. So my first thought on this podcast, it was just to appreciate you and your feedback on that conversation. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
You're welcome, my friend, and I hope to. I mean, all our conversations are very insightful for both sides. It's not only for on your side. Nevertheless, I would love to have like um, a statue made of plants in the hub when it's done. Um,
We'll definitely do that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
like
so yeah.
yeah, we'll put the statue like in the hub, like this very big open space, and in the middle, like a giant statue of yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it
So,
has to be like in a with plants. So in that way, you
yeah.
are carbon offsetting some of the
Yeah.
emissions that you are emitting with your operations.
Yeah, of course. So let's start before we get into sustainability, and of course talking about the modern golden age, because I would love to have your take on it. Let's start with how we met. So we met in when you were the president of this NGO here in Portugal called Year Portugal, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what they do and your experience as a leader of that organization.
Okay, so going a little bit back in time, Year Portugal is an NGO that at the moment has around 10 years, 10, 11 years, and it all started when Gonzalo, the founder, was doing a gap year throughout the world, and he realized like how impactful that experience was to him. So at the moment, Gonzalo and Tiago, that was the other person that was doing the gap year with him, together, they decided to come back to Portugal and create an NGO that will be making a gap year a possibility for every young person in Portugal. So that's how we started. And then there were two main goals with this NGO. One of them was promoting the concept, because unfortunately here in Portugal, it was something that it was not very known. I mean, it has to do with the culture. People want security in their lives. They want to follow a straight line. So one of the parts was related with promoting the concept. And then the second was giving the tools and frameworks and well, all the necessary things for these young people to do their own gap year. And well, in a nutshell, then they have a lot of projects. They do a lot of things in schools, in universities, with the city councils. They have an amazing projects. And while the main goal, much more than a gap year, it's like the goal of the NGO is to build what they call a generation plus. A plus generation. It's like a generation of people with skills that allow the humanity to drive, let's say.
Yeah, and we met there because you were present back then. We created this friendship, and back then we both were thinking about the same problem, which was the educational system and how we can change it, and we were passionate about it. In fact, when I started to build my own NGO, What Drives Youth, which, as many of the listeners know, it failed, but you were one of the persons that was actually down in the trenches with me, helping me build it. But I do remember that in that moment, while I was just reaffirming that the education and teaching people and connecting people and using education as a tool to bring a modern golden age, even though I didn't use that expression back then, was my calling. You slowly drift into another calling, which was sustainability. And I was wondering, before we start that, like, what were the main reasons that made you switch? Why did you end up going from trying to solve the education problem to just focus on sustainability?
Okay, so the short answer is facing reality. The long one, and maybe I can go a little bit back on track. My background is on management. I started working in China in the non-formal education sector. Then I came back to Portugal, where I am from, and I started to work in this NGO. And I love what I was doing, and I thought, okay, I will be a social entrepreneur in the education sector for the rest of my life, because we really need to make a shift in this sector, and I want to be part of it. But then at some point, I participated at a boot camp from Lidera, a community of young leaders from multiple backgrounds that wanted to be brought together and discuss climate change and try to understand a little bit the things that were happening. And at the moment, I had no relationship. And I had no relationship with the issue. So I thought it was something really far away from me. But then I went to this bootcamp where we had scientists, anthropologists, managers, politicians, people working like in the health sector, people from everywhere. And there was a clear consensus, especially from the climate scientists. And basically the consensus is we need to change. At the moment, we are at a time, at a place that everything that we take for granted, we can lose it. It's like an invisible change that is happening, but will fundamentally change the way we operate, the way we relate with each other, and the way we have been working for the past centuries. So I
Mm-hmm.
realized, and then, well, I started to feel something called climate anxiety, and at that moment, I changed. So first, I decided to make some small changes, like change my behavior with small things, but
Mm-hmm.
then it was not enough. So I made the decision to shift towards a career in the sustainability field and try to use the knowledge that I already had in the past to
Mm-hmm.
this new field and help in this transition.
Mm-hmm.
Because my mindset, or what I realized, was like, I mean, why am I working in education if we will not have a society that is like operating in the proper way, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
education, maybe we will not have education in the future because like the conditions will be so bad that all the work I'm doing will be wasted in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, let's first secure the baseline, and
Mm-hmm.
then yeah,
Build
education
up
is,
on it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was more or less that.
Yeah. So and so let's start there, because you mentioned a bunch of different things. And usually in my head, when I think about sustainability, the first thing that comes to mind is precisely climate change. But sustainability goes a little bit beyond that, right? There's a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff in there. So maybe help me understand a little bit about it. So when we talk about sustainability, which is something that we see all around us right now, companies talk about it, public figures talk about it, politicians talk about, like, what we mean when you talk about sustainability.
Well, sustainability nowadays is a really broad term, and usually, not usually, but a lot of times can be misused by some people. But basically, the concept of sustainability is doing, I mean, operating in a way that you can guarantee the needs of today without trying to do the translation in my mind.
Yeah.
So, like using the resources that you have today to operate your society without putting in danger
Compromising.
future generations. So there is more or less like the general
Mm-hmm.
concept,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a lot of areas that you can work on when you are talking about sustainability. So sustainability, first of all, is not only about environmental change challenges. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
that you have environmental challenges, but you always have to consider a triple dimension. So
Mm-hmm.
the environmental side, the economical side, and the social part
Mm.
as well. And
And yeah, sorry to interrupt, but like
man,
from those three points in your experience, like, because I mean, you're focused on finding solutions. You and a bunch of other people are focused on finding solutions. And my question is, like, in order to have different solutions from those problems, we'll definitely need to tackle those three areas that you just mentioned. Like, from the economic, the environmental, and the social one, what is the one that's hardest to change?
well, all of them are difficult to change because after all, they are all interconnected.
Mm,
I mean, for example, sometimes you can, for instance, here in Portugal, you can decide to close some energy factory that is producing energy, but they are using coal. And well, you can close this factory and you can change into a hydrogen solution or something like that. But you have to consider that you had hundreds, thousands of people working in these factories. So if
mm-hmm.
you are closing these, you have to find a solution and
For
probably
those people.
reskill these people in
Yeah.
order for them to have an alternative job.
Yeah.
So when you talk about climate change, most of the time you also talk about a just transition,
Yeah.
and basically this is making the changes like that will benefit the environment
Mm-hmm.
without forgetting that at the end of the day, we want to make people to have a good life.
Yeah.
So not forgetting people in the way.
Yeah, it's the because that's what's fascinating. That's why I really wanted to talk with you, which is um like most of the people or actually not most of the people because I haven't done that research, but the things that I read about climate change and the people that I usually talk about climate change, and look, I mean no way a climate change is not. I do think we really need to change. But the thing is, usually when we think about it, we think about making a lot of changes that will hurt us. And what you just mentioned, you just switched the narrative. You just said, look, you can just go in and close the coal factory and forget about the hundreds of the employees that are there and that they suddenly have nothing to do, and how will their lives be impacted. So that makes a little sense. And uh, still in that area, like in the different problems around sustainability, one of your focus is on climate change, right?
Yeah, especially climate change and how the circular economy principles can tackle climate change.
Yeah, so let's go into that. So the first thing is, maybe in order for us to understand that problem, it has basically two areas, so climate change and circular economy. So let's start with, I think everyone knows what climate change is, but do you have any like additional commentaries that you want to share about that topic, for us to get even scared of how impactful that may be?
Okay, so maybe before diving into like the scientific explanation, I'll just give
Mm-hmm.
you an example that at the time I didn't understand how impactful that was to me, but now like when I look back, I realized that it was a really important moment. So in 2017,
Yeah.
here in Portugal, we had big fires in
Yeah.
like an area called Pedrógão Grande,
Yeah.
where a lot of acres of land were burned. We had a lot of people that lost their houses, lost everything that they had to sustain themselves, and there were even dozens of people that
To die.
died from
Yeah.
that incident. And at the time, like a friend and I, we couldn't look at that and not doing anything. So we decided to gather a group of people, try to find some goods that were really necessary in those points, in those areas, and go there with everything that we could collect it. So we ended up being like in the forefront of giving this support to some of the people that were most affected in these areas. And well, it was really, I mean, it's hard to describe in words what I felt at that moment, because listening to that people that went through a lot of suffering, like in a night, in a day, everything that they have built, or most of the things that they have built,
Was gone.
were just lost, were
Yeah.
gone. And there was one specific person that really touched me. She was, well, she was an old woman called Dona Maria Irene, and while she was 70 years old, she was a farmer, so she used to work in a camp. She had a lot of animals, but with the fire, everything was burned, just like a small cottage that she had with some tools that survive.
Mm-hmm.
And she had no support. She had no one else to help her. She had an husband that was like in a bed and needed medical devices to
Mm.
help him. Um, and she was really desperate because there was nothing. She had lost everything, and there was nothing that she could do, and no one to support her, like in overcoming this situation. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
like after the fires, someone went there before we arrived and robbed her. Like they went and
Jesus.
took away all the tools that she had to work the land.
Mm.
And well, at the moment, I thought this could have happened like to my grandfather, to my grandmother, or even to me, like in the
Mm.
future. And for me, when I talk about climate change, I mean, of course, that this situation is specific. It's not possible to
Mm-hmm.
prove that it was due climate change.
Mm-hmm.
However, science tells us that these type of extreme weather conditions that then cause
The fires.
disasters,
Mm-hmm.
like fires, storms, floods, will
Mm-hmm.
be more and more frequent. And at the end of the day, this has huge impacts in people's life, like people that live far away from us, but
Mm-hmm.
also people that we love and that are
Yeah.
just like, or even to us. I mean, for example, last year in Belgium and Germany, there were huge floods that it's really easy to find if you look on the internet. That, I mean, you had completely complete cities under water,
Yeah.
and people lost cars. I mean, the gardens, some of the houses, um, and well, I mean, now you start to see these events, and they
Mm-hmm.
happen here, there. But what the science tells us is, if we continue this path, the problem will get worse,
Mm-hmm.
and these will be more and more frequent. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like the environmental part that affects the social sphere and the people.
Yeah. And
So
but the biggest issue, I think you just nailed it, which is most of the times those things happen far away from me, right? And so I'm okay with it because I like I live near Leiria, which is the place near where the fire that you're mentioning happened. And I remember that we couldn't go, like I live it's a bunch of kilometers far from the place where the fires were burning, and still we couldn't leave the house because there was smoke all around. And so but until then, like, most people see that problem as point A, like far away. Point B, maybe they don't even recognize that climate change is the issue, right? They'll look at the fire, they'll look at the flood and say, well, those are things that happen. They don't make that connection. And my question is, and I don't know if you have an answer, but I would love to have your take on it, which is like, how can we help people understand that those things are not as far as they think. Like, sure, that specific flood happened in Germany, sure, but the issue that made that flood happen is actually very close to you. Like, how can we reduce that gap?
okay, so I think it comes back to the beginning of our conversation, education, because you will only try to solve a problem if you first recognize that there is a problem, and that you can contribute to that change.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I would say that, I mean, humans are beings of habits. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for someone to change an habit. And here we are not only talking about individual changes, but collective changes to
Yeah.
make a shift. And I mean, it's difficult if you go and have a conversation with someone and say, hey, you are eating meat. Did you know that your meat is contributing to climate change, to biodiversity, to the loss of biodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
to natural resources scarcity? And there is this type of activism that I think a lot of times is used, called guilt activism, that basically is trying to make people feel guilt to act. But most of the time, this doesn't like have
Right.
results, because people just feel like, okay, like you are having this conversation with me, I kind of feel bad, so I don't even want to hear what you are saying. And to
Yeah, and,
me,
and and they also, sorry, but they also see it
well,
as an attack, right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
if you came to me and say, "Look, you're a dumbass that's eating meat, and you're this and you're that," the first thing that I'm going to do as a human being, I'm going to go into defense mode. I'm
Yeah.
going to right. I'll offer resistance to your idea.
And then there is a second part. It's when we are talking about climate change or biodiversity loss or other problems in the sustainability, not only the environmental part, we are talking about complex topics. And most of the time, it's really hard to understand what are the connections and to understand what is happening. So here enters the education. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that people understand what the problem is. And then, and I think this is the most important part, make them understand or give the tools so they can be part of that change, either as citizens, either as students, or as consumers, or as someone that works somewhere that can start to have more sustainable practices. But we all in our lives can contribute somehow to this change. Of course, that just by ourselves we will not change the world, but at the end of the day, it's always these small changes inside each one of us that will contribute to a bigger shift.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems is that that's actually really hard to see, because like I can put myself in a places of someone who wants to contribute to climate change stopping, and I'll definitely have a bunch of places and practices that I need to change in order to contribute to it, reducing even more. But even so, I'll still try to do it. However, I can put myself in a spot where I look at the changes that people will ask me to do and think, well, but I'm just one person. I'm not going to have that many impact. And of course, there are a bunch of people who will do it, so let them do it, and I'll keep it here, and maybe this will figure it out, right? Like, and I don't think there's actually a clear solution to that, because I think that's part of the human nature. You care mostly about what's important to you and what's more than what's important, what's relevant to you. And what's relevant, it's usually something that's near you. So it's really hard for me to worry about problems that I don't see or that I don't connect with, right?
Yeah, and well, I think that we as a human species, at some point, we disattach with nature.
Mm,
So we think that we can control nature and that we live outside
mm,
nature, the natural world, let's say, and we forget where our food comes from. We forget that we need water to survive. We forget that we need materials to build all of the things that we have around us.
mm-hmm,
Um, and most of the time, when people think about sustainability, they think as not a problem for the humankind, like a
mm,
problem for the forests, a problem for the oceans, but not something that will directly affect humans, because we are like above nature somehow. And well, I think that what you need, it's once again bring education, so like in a to try to decodify all these really complex issues into
mm-hmm.
something that people can understand. And here, if you that are out there listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, there is a really good, nice tool called Climate Terrestre, that
Uh,
basically is a Climate
sorry.
Terrestre,
Oh, first.
or in Portuguese, Mural do Clima,
Mm,
that in is a 3-hour workshop that will basically tell you what climate change is through a card game. So you have here, this is the Portuguese version, but you have like different cards. You are playing in a group, and you will understand like what are the causes, what are the consequences, what is the issue, the big frame, all based in the most like actual climate science done
mm-hmm,
by IPCC from United Nations. And well, this is the type of tools that I think we need.
mm-hmm,
Tools that can teach people to learn in a fun way, like bring people together using gamification,
mm-hmm,
to instead of making people feeling guilt,
mm-hmm,
making them empowered, and
mm-hmm.
in a way they can act.
Yeah. So you just mentioned something that I've never thought about, which was like, I mean, I thought about that, but not in relationship with climate change, which is we as human species lost touch with nature.
Yeah,
And do you believe that if we find a way as a species to connect with nature, that some of these practices would be easier to adopt?
for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
because, for example, if we look at our country measure its success as a country, let's say, you look at GDP, and
Mm-hmm.
well, GDP, it's a metric that it's like merely an economic
Mm.
um,
Metric.
metric
Mm-hmm.
indicator. So there are a lot of things that you are losing looking just at that specific metric. It's related with a lot of things in the past that like social people had more the middle income families, the number of middle income families grew.
Mm-hmm.
Usually economic growth is related with a better quality of life,
Yeah.
but I mean, there are a lot of things that are not considered in that metric. And one of them, for example, is where are we getting our resources?
Mm-hmm.
Because to have like all of that economic growth, we need most of the time resources to build things up.
Mm-hmm.
And these resources are not like unlimited. There is a
Mm-hmm.
limited amount of resources, and to have these resources, sometimes we have to go to a forest and cut the forest, or go to some place and start to mine a place. And there is a lot. I mean, there is you lose a natural ecosystem that
Mm-hmm.
gives life to a lot of animals, and these animals have interconnections
Yeah.
that we don't even understand,
Yeah.
and we don't even know at this point.
Yeah. It's
So I think it's a matter of what we value at the end of the day.
yeah,
And
and I think
go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying that for instance, for me, and I believe that for a lot of Portuguese people, talking a little bit about our country, like we're used to see trees, sea, and nature, and but I wonder, like someone who just spends his whole life in a city with almost no parks, with almost no touch in nature, where and any nature that he sees on TVs or on videos. If I don't have that connection, um, I think that's going to be harder to change the mindset and the availability of that person to actually start to practice new things, because they don't have like a direct connection with nature, right? I mean, I'm just saying this because I like one of the things that really blew my mind when I was younger was realizing that a lot of people never saw the sea. Like to me, this is crazy because I've always lived like 10 minutes or a 10-minute car ride to the sea. But the same that's similar. Like people live in these complex industrial cities where and they have like zero touch with nature, trying to make them understand that they need to change. It's hard, and I do believe that you're spot on when you mention like education as part of the solution, because in order to build like this sustainable change and systematic change, people need to understand what are all the forces that are connected, and also have like this clear path of what are things that I can do to make it. And I do have one more question, Tiago, which is one of the things that I personally believe as a trainer, as an entrepreneur, as someone who thinks a lot about education and about human beings, one of the things that I really know actually that works when bringing some kind of change is to find like the minimal viable action. Like what's the smallest thing that you can do that somehow contributes to achieving that goal, and then start to capitalize on that. Like, if someone who's listening to the podcast and thinks, well, okay, I want to change, what's the minimal viable action that they can make in order to contribute to a better climate situation in the world?
So going again to what we were talking about, the first thing is understanding the problem. Just so educate yourself about the issue, about climate change, about diversity, biodiversity loss, about the sustainability challenges that we have had. Because only once you have a minimum comprehension of the challenge, you can act on it, either at an individual level or at a systemic level. You have first to understand the problem. And I think, I mean, we live in a time, going back to where we started, we live in a time where sustainability is a trendy word, but most of the time we don't know what is implicit, and we don't understand what sustainability should work for. So once again, find ways to learn about sustainability. You have, for example, Climate Fresque that I told you. They have workshops all around the world. You also have online workshops. There's also other types of workshops with the same mindset. So you have one about circular economy, one about the oceans, one about digital transition. That will be the first step I would recommend to anyone that wants to tackle the challenge, is first understand what you want to tackle.
And that makes total sense. However, I'm going to just push you back a little and say like for instance, let's say that I'm a 50 years old man, and my granddaughter just mentioned this, or my daughter just mentioned this thing called climate change. I don't want to go to an workshop. I just really want to know what practice can I do for her to be happy and for me to contribute to a bigger, because I'm just mentioning this because I believe that that's one of the issues in this field, is that it's of course it's important for us to understand the problem, and most people working on this are people that care about the problem and are youngsters that do have the availability and the need and the desire to learn more about the problem. However, there are a bunch of people that don't and still want to contribute. And to those people, can you just name a few practices, or you just believe that it's impossible to do that, and the first thing that they really need to do is to understand the problem?
Because once again, we are talking about a systemic problem, and when we are talking about a systemic problem, we have different players in this ecosystem, let's say, and depending where you are, you can do different things. So for example, imagine that you are a student. Your actions, you are a student and you are vegetarian, and you don't travel by airplane, you only use train, or like a bus run that goes with hydrogen, I don't know. It will be a completely different type of actions than, for example, a CEO of an energy company that has a lot of people under his or rule. Because when we are talking about change, we are talking about individual change. So the things that I can do as an individual in my home, with my family, with my friends. But we are also talking about the things that we can do as citizens. So, for example, being involved in local politics, or being like an activist and fight for certain rights. But we can also talk about us as workers. So we are in a certain workplace. What can we do to make sure that our organization is contributing to a better world? So I would say that it completely depends on where you are, who you are, and what you are already doing, plus what's your influence in all of these different spheres.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know if you The
No,
answer
no, that's
satisfies
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. That's fine. I think you mentioned a bunch of things that that people may do, regardless of whatever context they're in. Like probably decreasing the amount of meat and fish that they eat will help. Things like using more public transportation will also help. But yeah, you raise a good point. Like it depends on your sphere, right? If you're a CEO, you'll probably have different things that you need to do, that if you're someone a normal, let's say, citizen. Yeah, so
And here, just one more thing, that is, a lot of the times we aim to be perfect. So all the changes that we want to do, we try to make them in a perfect way.
yeah,
But the truth is, of course, that we need a big shift. But if each one of us, if we cannot make that big shift like at once, we can at least to try to make small shifts in
mhm,
our lives. And even if we know that it's not perfect, but I mean, there is no perfect way of living. All of us have negative impacts in our lives, environmentally,
mhm,
social. So we just have to find ways to
yeah,
try to minimize those impacts little by little,
yeah,
even if we know that we are not perfect. For example, you were giving the example of eating, like quitting meat and fish from your meals.
yeah,
And most of the people, what do is, instead of just trying to completely cut it from their diets, what they do is, okay, let's reduce.
yeah,
Instead of eating meat and fish every meal, let's like eat twice a week, 3 times a week.
yeah,
And that has already a huge impact.
yeah,
And after all, change by change, you realize, well, maybe now I can go a little bit further, or
mhm,
maybe I can work on other parts of my
mhm,
life. And maybe going back a little bit to what you were saying, if I'm someone that wants to make changes but I don't know where to start, there are really great uh, questionnaires out there where you can basically answer to a couple of questions. You understand what are your biggest impacts, negative impacts, and then it gives you a list of suggestions on what will be the best actions for you to take in order to reduce the most your
mhm.
impacts.
We'll definitely link some of those, so people can do it. And so we just talked a lot about climate change, and now let's switch to another thing that you work on, because I believe that, of course, and then we'll get to the modern golden age, because I do believe that the modern golden age is somehow related, or your vision of the modern golden age will be related to both of these things. So we talked about climate change. Then another thing that you're working on as well is circular economy. So for someone who doesn't know jack shit about circular economy, like myself, please explain what it is, how it works, and what are its advantages.
Okay, so first of all, let me just go back to why it started. We live in an economic model that what we do is we extract materials, we transport those materials to a factory, we build something, we sell, we use them, and then once it's used, it's wasted and it goes somewhere. It's dumped in a place that we cannot see, we cannot look. We think it's like, well, it's somewhere there. And this system has two main problems. One of them is here on one end, we are exploiting too much natural resources, and there will be a point where those natural resources will end. So we have this problem. If we want to
Mhm.
build things, there will be a point where we'll no longer have
Things.
raw
Yeah.
materials to build. And on the other side of the value chain, we have a waste problem. We have plastic going to the oceans. We have clothes that end up dumped somewhere. And well, we have a lot of things that end up being wasted and are placed in places where we cannot look at them most of the time, but have strong impacts on the environment and on society. So there are these two forces, or these two problems: too much waste, and we are exploiting
too much resources.
So what circular economy tries to do is, let's try to keep the materials in the system for as long as possible. So instead of I extract, I build, I use, and I waste, let's try to make something different. And here enters something that I guess some of you have already heard. It's called the ladder of R's. So there are several things you can do to implement circular economy principles, and this can be done once again at an individual level, at a government level, or at a company level. If we are talking about, and usually what you can do is first refuse. So first refuse, maybe I don't need to buy these, or maybe it's a necessary thing that I can I don't need it that much. Then you can rethink, okay, is there anything else that I can use for the same purpose? There is also reusing. So buying things secondhand instead of buying new. If they are good, why not? You can rent things instead of buying. Imagine that I want to go surf in Costa de Caparica, but I don't have a surfboard. So I can surf one. I can rent one for a day, and then use it. I will have the same amazing experience, but the cost will be much lower, and I will not be sending a signal to the market that you need to produce more. Well, you can also remanufacture the things. For example, I used to work with a company that they were using electric batteries from cars. They were using most of the components, introducing some new, and then they will have a battery for a home application instead of using all of it from raw materials. They were using most of it from something that will just go wasted into something that will have a new use. And of course, you can also recycle. You can also recycle is the last option. First of all, you should try to maximize to keep the materials in place. And there are amazing business models around a circular economy that, well, it really makes you see that it's something not only valuable for the planet and society, let's say, but it's also something that implemented in the proper way can be really nice for companies.
Can you give an example of how it would be good for a company to implement that model?
Of course. So, for example, we are in the agri-food sector. I know a company that actually is more or less from where you are from, and what they do is they started by producing chickens, and these chickens would produce poop and would have some bones when not everything was used at the end of the process. They would raise the chicken, then they would kill the chicken, they would sell, but there were some things that were taken out from this process. So what they have done was, let's use some of the things that at the moment are wasted and incorporate to have more sources of revenue, for example. So the poop, they started to use it instead of buying fertilizers. They started to use it in their agriculture fields to grow things. So they save money in that part by using something that was just waste. Another example, some or how you can like innovate with circular business models. There
Mm-hmm.
is this company called it's a Dutch company called Fairphone, and well, as you might know, we are always changing our phones, like because it gets out of date or it starts being too slow. And what they do is, instead of buying a new phone, why don't you just upgrade yours? So if you want a different camera, if you want a better RAM memory, you
Mm.
can just switch that part of the
Component.
gear instead of buying the whole thing new. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a completely new market that they are exploring and has a lot of traction, actually. So they are
Yeah.
just creating a completely new way of doing things.
Yeah, awesome. And so basically, what happens is you help companies to incorporate this new model, and while they do it, they make some changes that help to reduce climate change. Is that it? The way you
Oh,
mix them both?
I mean, not only climate change, but all the social challenges that you have,
Yeah.
the environmental and social challenge that you have. But basically, the goal is, let's look at sustainability or circular economy not as something that will make your operations more difficult, but something that you can both contribute to a better world
Mm-hmm.
while being more competitive
Mm-hmm.
in the market. You just have to do it in the proper way and with the proper players around you. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, you can be very benevolent and you can want to do a better like good in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but you're if you are a company, you want to make sure that you are competitive,
Yeah.
so and that you are offering what the market is asking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, most of the time it's a challenging job, because once again, it's very difficult to change at like only a company level. Most of the times you have to change as a system
Mm-hmm.
to really tackle the most difficult challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But it's step by step. So maybe if one organization change, then it leads to others to change. Because after all, the market, the consumers, most of the time, they are demanding for new solutions.
Yeah.
So if you don't adapt to this new reality, you will be left behind sooner
Yeah.
or later. I mean, you can lead or you can be led by
Yeah.
someone else, and you choose.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and I know that you're really good at your job. So more organizations, if someone is listening in, wants like this kind of consultancy. I don't know how to say it, like coaching, training, whatever. Tiago does it really well. And so uh, because to me, you everything that you're talking about makes absolute sense in order for us to get to a better place as humanity, and that better place as a species, as you know, I call it modern golden age. And one of the things that I've been doing through all these podcasts is to understand how does that look for my guests. And so that's my question to you, Tiago. Like, when you think about a modern golden age, what do you think about? And you can be like, there's people that go really specific on like aspects like infrastructures and stuff like that. There's people that have a more philosophical view. Everything is valid. To you, what's a modern golden age?
Okay, so that's a big question, all right? And I should have something prepared, since I was one of the persons that helped you to have this idea.
No,
Well,
but like, let me just add a small commentary, and while I do it, you can actually think about it. Because that's one of the things that I've been saying in these last few podcasts, which is when I started to think about it, the reason why I delayed the podcast so much was because I thought, just like you said, like I need to have a clear vision of what a modern golden age is, because after all, I'm going to ask it to people, so I might as well have a proper answer. But the thing is, I don't think we do. Like a modern golden age is definitely a different, like Andrew said that in the last episode, right? Like it's whatever people believe a modern golden age is, as long as they believe it. And so I don't think you have to have this grandiose answer. I just want your take on it.
Okay, so I would say that for me, a modern golden age, first of all, a golden age for me, it's a time where human life can flourish, or where humans can flourish. So a modern human age will need certain ingredients in order for us to grow and to flourish as a society. And for that to happen, what we need, in my perspective, what we need, once again, is a systemic shift. For example, to start valuing less ownership and start looking more at the use that we give to things, valuing less material stuff and looking more for experiences or relationships. Try to point less the fingers to others, and try to bring people together and really collaborate to create new solutions, to create art, to create, I mean, a beautiful world that we can live in. So a modern golden age, yeah, it can be, I mean, a lot of things, but it's a place where humans can flourish, can challenge themselves, and can live in harmony both within the human species and with the outside, like the outside human species. So with nature, with other animals, and so on.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. So one of the things, now for real, one of the things that I do in the podcast, as you know, is trying to understand, like, what are some of the practices and goals and beliefs and values that we need to bring that modern golden age. Because like Alexander talked about this beautiful concept, which was like courageous beauty, because to her, she mixed those two values into one. And I was wondering, like, modern practices, because when we talk about practices, you'll probably answer me a bunch of them that we already mentioned, like practices that allows you, like, recycle, reuse, refuse, all those R's, and those are specific practices that we both believe should be in a modern golden age. So I was wondering, like, in your take, what are some of the common values that we as a species have to have in order to bring a modern golden age into reality?
I would say the most important value is love slash empathy. I mean, you need to first love yourself to believe that you can flourish, you can be part of the change, you can contribute to a modern golden age or to a better society. You need to love those that are around you, your family, your friends, contribute to their growth, help them when they need, being like humble enough to ask for help when you need as well. And then you need a love for like the humankind, and even if you have differences or different religion, different political view, if you have things that make you different, but at the end of the day, you want the same. It's a good life for you, for others. You just have a different way to express it, or to make it into reality. And I really believe that in order for a modern golden age to happen, we need to collaborate. And we can only collaborate if we feel empathy for each other. And well, love. is something that it's very powerful, even when this is something that comes from the time of the golden age, or the first golden age, the Greek time, where I don't know which philosopher talked about a love for all, for all people. And besides this love, we also have to love what feeds us, So we
Yeah.
have to love nature
Nature.
or the planet as a whole, to make sure that we are welcome here and that we can flourish as humankind as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful rant on love. Let me ask you just one more question before we wrap this up. Do you have any practices that you do in order to cultivate love?
I think the practice that I would say I do the most is try to put myself as in put myself in places where I have contact with completely different people and
Mhm.
really try to understand their views of the world, their needs, what are
Mhm.
their pains, without judging. Um, just try to connect with people that have different perspectives, different views. Because at the end of the day, if you understand someone, you will feel more close to that person, even if you don't share the same views as that person. But if you can deep a little bit into
Yeah.
what motivates that person, why is the person the way he or she is, you can better connect and understand that, well, we have it's like a cliche, but we have a lot of things that make us different. But if we like do chunking up, we
Mhm.
understand that at the end of the day, we all want the
The same.
same. That
Yeah.
is like the best for us and for the ones that are around us.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Tiago, you're a fantastic human being. I really enjoy you.
Thank you.
For everyone listening, you should definitely try to get in touch with Tiago because he has such a great vibe. If anyone actually wants to connect with you and to talk with you about sustainability or anything else, what's the best way to do it, Tiago?
Well, probably is through LinkedIn. At the
Yeah,
moment, it's where I'm more active. Or you can even we can also leave my email
yeah,
in the
in the
description
description.
if someone wants
Yeah.
to reach out.
We'll
More than
definitely do it. Tiago, once again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you. I've learned a lot about both climate change, sustainability, and circular economy. I hope everyone listening does too. And if you want to connect with a beautiful human being, you should definitely connect with Tiago. He's awesome. Tiago, thank you so much.
thank you. It was a
And
pleasure.
yeah, thank you. And to everyone else listening, if you like the podcast, you could leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, or subscribe. That would mean the world to me and to what I'm trying to build. And thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.